So Martin, thanks very much for joining me today. I usually tell people a small bit about someone who's joining me, but your CV is so impressive. I'm going to let you just tell people about who you are.
Yeah, thanks. I've often been called the Swiss Army knife of marketing because I've got a lot of tools. I had a background in corporate marketing. And then after about 30 years with that, I became an entrepreneur. So for the last a little bit more than a decade, I've started up a bunch of companies. Some have worked ridiculously well, some have failed. And so I'm a marketing oriented ex-CEO who's now an entrepreneur. And that's kind of the best way to do it. And somewhere in there, I've also become an author, writing a few books on fitness, especially with an anti-aging angle. So kind of, again, I think a Swiss Army knife of marketing sort of defines what I am.
Right. And diving into one or two things, you've done something that I say a lot of entrepreneurs would love to do. Spirits, tequila, that type of stuff, which is, and you've seen people here doing whiskey in Ireland, whiskey brands and all that. It's a very hard industry to get into and to start up. What made you, first of all, go down that route? Because you're involved in a few companies that are in the, I would say, in the spirits world. I don't mean dead people, I mean in the drink industry. What made you go down that route?
Well, I was really lucky. My first job right out of school was for a company called Heublein, which is what has evolved into Diageo. So I walked into that category right out of school. And at the time, it was such an incredibly good company. It owned Kentucky Fried Chicken. It owned a grocery products division, which was A1 steak sauce and a bunch of other products. But then there was the spirits business, which wound up being my focus. And, that had Smirnoff vodka, the world's largest spirits brand, a number of other interesting brands, Jose Cuervo tequila before it was a global brand, Black Velvet whiskey, Famous Grouse. We're talking about some phenomenal portfolio brands. And I got to work on all of them. And it really, I was there almost 15 years, and it's kind of the foundation of my business career because it's such a great category, not only for understanding global business, but the importance of branding is so critical to the spirits business. And I became a pretty adept at brand strategy and brand management. And at the time, our company was populated by a lot of Procter & Gamble trained brand managers. And that sort of made me a hybrid Procter & Gamble approach. But at the same time, the spirits business is also kind of freewheeling. And so I'm a little of that too, which is, experimental and risk-taking and entrepreneurial. So it was a really great foundation, and it's stayed with me. So, cut to the present, I'm very comfortable working in that category. So, years ago, with some partners, we launched a tequila company, and that's because of my background in Jose Cuervo tequila. I know that category really well. But, you mentioned whiskey. It is actually my favorite category, and my current company is a whiskey company. And we're literally about to launch a very exciting Irish whiskey next month. I'm really excited about it.
And what are you calling that?
Well, the company is called Unbound Spirits. And we launched with great fanfare a few months back. We've got a bourbon product that we sold out very quickly. But the product right behind that is Irish whiskey, and it's called Hooligan Soup.
Fantastic name.
It's really cool, actually. We think it's got a lot of personality. And what we're doing is very interesting with all of our whiskeys is we are giving them extra aging in oak in the storage area of boats rocking on Lake Michigan. So the whole idea, as you probably know, whiskey gets a lot of its flavor from interaction with the wood in its barrels. The more interaction, the more complex the whiskey gets. And so no one's really done this before. We did it with bourbon. We've been experimenting it with an Irish blend. And so we're mixing a proprietary mixture of Irish whiskeys into used bourbon barrels and then putting them out on Lake Michigan. And they'll be coming off of Lake Michigan in about 2 months, bottling, and then they'll be for sale probably in May. So we're really excited about it.
I say you are, and how long have they been in the barrels in the boats at sea?
Yeah, so there's a couple of brands that are putting it in large boats at sea, and that's a great thing. We're doing it in smaller fishing boats in Lake Michigan, which in some cases is actually rougher. So it gets an incredible amount of agitation. And our first batches are really incredible. The bourbon we launched, which we literally sold every drop that we could make for the next year, just based on a little bit of publicity and the initial reviews, is so interesting and complex because, again, shaking it for 3 or 4 or 5 months in fresh oak barrels on Lake Michigan, it smooths it out to the point where you have the complexity of the blends that are there, but the rough edges are all smoothed out. So it's really unique, and we're really excited about what the same process is going to do to this Irish whiskey blend. So it's fun.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic, and I'm looking forward to tasting that. So, and is your primary market starting off the States, or are you actually hitting the Irish market?
Yeah, it is going to be the States because we just aren't scaled up yet. But once we scale, we hope we've got a tiger by the tail here and hope that company can scale fast. The issue right now with whiskey is not only source material product, but it's hard to get fresh barrels right now. The logistics of getting fresh barrels are kind of slowed down a little bit, of course, post-pandemic. So we've got plenty of capital to do it. Our issue is going to be barrels and source whiskey, especially source Irish whiskey, which we're not making our own. We're buying it from makers and importing it. But so we're just figuring out. Again, this is our first batch. And what we know is we've got a great product at a consumer level. Now the challenge for us is going to be to put the infrastructure in place to scale that and sell it. But right now, pretty much we're in Wisconsin and Florida in the States. And unfortunately for us, we're going to miss St. Patrick's Day this year.
Paddy's Day would have been the ideal day to launch a new Irish whiskey brand.
I know.
Absolutely.
I know. But, we are going to be able to, we'll have our commercial website ready by then. And what we hope is we'll be able to take reservations for the product when it is available. So we're rushing to get that in time, for next week. It's going to be close. We might not make it, but yeah, when we conceived this brand, we thought we might make St. Paddy's Day, but it's there's always snags along the way, and it's taken a little longer than we thought.
But isn't that, like, I can hear you in your voice and see in your eyes, isn't that the thrill really of being an entrepreneur and running your own business? One, nothing ever goes to plan.
Right.
If you have a plan, throw it away because it won't work. And if you say something's going to take 6 months, multiply it by 2. And
that seems to be the case. Especially, you probably know this: the spirits industry is fairly regulated, and you've got to go through lots of paperwork to get brands approved, state approvals, distribution approvals, and they're all taking longer than they used to right now. So we were optimistic. We thought we might make Christmas for the Maelstrom, which is our bourbon blend, and we didn't get it really launched in market until mid-February. So it takes longer, and it's you've got to plan for that. You can be optimistic, but also you can get ahead of yourself if you are too optimistic.
You can, yeah, and that can lead to other problems. And just going back 1 or 2 steps, like being an entrepreneur, you've had a good few successes, but you've also had a few failures, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What do you think, like coming from the likes of Ireland, the UK, where people whose companies don't work out, they're not looked favorably on, where individuals who come from the States, it's sort of a badge of honor. Okay, he has more experience. He knows the mistakes he's made. He or she won't make them again. What do you think is when you had 1 or 2 that didn't work out, what made you get up the next day and do it again?
That is, of course, the core personality trait of the entrepreneur, is being able to rebound from failure, to be persistent and resilient. I think that's what separates entrepreneurs from people who prefer a safer corporate environment. I always liken it to the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to roll a heavy stone uphill, and just before you get to the top, it rolls back down to the bottom. Well, do you have the energy to go back down and start rolling the ball uphill again? And that's the key thing. And I think you get that It's partly, it's a personality trait, but I always go back to another one of my businesses. I have a lot of experience in the fitness category, and I find what you learn in the fitness category is resilience, the ability to overcome obstacles. And I think, as far as a general lesson, not just for entrepreneurs, but for corporate people, because you always have obstacles. The fitter you are, the more energy you have, the more mental strength you have, the more resilience you have to then go down to the bottom and start rolling that ball back up the hill. You have to. Nothing goes according to plan, as you said.
No, nothing. So, it's interesting because someone we interviewed last week, Mark Dwyer, who of the Big Red Cloud, which he sells financial packages to companies in Ireland, doing extremely well. He's been in the business a long time. He's adapted, adapted, and he's ran Ironman. He's ran something like 9 or 10 marathons. I'm more 11. If he's listening, he'll probably tell me I'm wrong. I think it's 9 Ironman, right? And like you can see how the two of them with him, as you're saying with yourself, go hand in hand. But is that one of the reasons why you were saying earlier on, like you've written the book, The Secret of Aging Well, right? And to get outside, and you were saying hiking is basically to you the key to not aging, the key to keeping well and to keeping mindfulness and all that type of stuff. Yeah,
that's what works for me. I listen, I started out as I'm a mountaineer, and there's 1,000 mountaineering books. I thought writing a book about hiking would be more approachable. And also the lessons of hiking, there's the concept of unknown trails, up and down, getting lost, finding your way, the concept of a false summit that you see when you're both mountaineering and hiking, which is, you get to a place you thought was the end of the road or the top of the hill, and you discover there's another hill right behind it. And what that requires is then you have to suck it up, and it's a mental challenge to then get the energy to go finish the task. And I just see incredible analogies to life and business careers in hiking and mountaineering, but I focused the book on hiking because it's more approachable. And again, I wrote it at the beginning of the pandemic, and people really were looking for ways to be active and fit. And hiking really fits the bill. It's really, it's something you can do low cost without a lot of equipment. Yeah. And the benefits to your psyche go way beyond just the physical benefits. The challenges, the energy you get, the mental and spiritual feeling you get from being outside and hiking, I think it directly translates to more success in business and in life, and especially for an entrepreneur.
I think you're right. I think the one thing the pandemic showed us, like, who in our lifetime would have thought we were all going to be told to stay at home?
I know. It's baffling, isn't it?
Unbelievable. And then, like, if you hadn't seen it in the movie 20 years ago, you would have laughed.
I know.
And then who would have believed that a government would have said you can only walk 2 kilometers? And people, who knows, went to 2 kilometers, and like an invisible wall, you bounced back because you didn't want to go any further. But like the first few weeks were grand, but you probably saw it yourself. After a while, this thing of being enclosed, you're enclosed outside. You're not. But people got claustrophobic being outside because they couldn't go beyond a certain distance. And we see, like, sea swimming's gone very big, hiking's gone very big, walking's got very big. I think people just want to get out again. And as you said, hiking is a fantastic way, very cheap, good pair of boots, good walking gear, and you can basically go anywhere.
And where you are is prime terrain for hiking. It's so gorgeous, and you already have sort of an outside lifestyle. Yes. And Europeans are much more, I think, connected to the outdoors than Americans these days. Always have been, I think, especially in the UK. So I think Ireland is such a beautiful country to hike, in Scotland especially. There's so many great opportunities, and I think people should take advantage of them. Even post-pandemic, it's critical. And I think we're made to be active. We're not made to be sitting at a desk staring at a screen like we're all doing right now. Yes. And have been doing for years. We're made to be out and about and moving. And especially, I think we've done some long-term damage, not only to our psyches, but to our bodies by spending so much time staring at screens and sitting at our desks the last few years. And I would encourage more than just business people and entrepreneurs, get outside as much as you can and walk uphill. It's really good for you.
Oh yeah, it's good for the heart, it's good for the blood. But isn't that probably one of the what challenges companies are having now in getting people to go back to the office? That people are suddenly seeing, why am I going in 9 to 5? Why am I traveling for an hour or 2 hours in, 1 or 2 hours home? Where if I work from home 3 or 4 days a week, come 5 past 5, my boots are on and I'm gone. Like what better way to live?
No, I know. I think if there's a good side to this, it's we've probably come to realize there's a better way than spending 70 hours a week at the office.
Yeah.
And some balance between work at home and work at the office is probably a better place. You know, it's kind of funny. My son is an investment banker and he works almost completely remotely now because of that. And he's having a better time doing it. And I see so many people who are now able to do that. So, but you don't want that to be a trap either. You don't want to be sitting at your desk at home all the time, because not only do we have needs to be outdoors, but I think we're social beings. I think we perform better at business when we're interacting with other people, and the interaction cannot be exclusively what we're doing right now. Zoom is great. Online,
it's a means to an end.
It is, but but you do need more serendipitous interaction with people than I'm logging on at 11 o'clock and let's talk for an hour. You need the ebb and flow of it. So I think we got to find a place that's both a little bit more at home and away from the office, but also a way to congregate in the office and collaborate and interact in a joint setting. And I think, it might wind up being the 3-day work week is the best thing, something like that. I don't know, but it clearly during the pandemic, we discovered that there are alternatives to the way we had all thought we had to work.
Absolutely. And it's funny, my wife is works with mostly young children because she's been a dyslexic. She teaches it one-to-one people who are dyslexic, has for the last 17 years. And when we go out for a walk in the evening, usually there's a castle called Malahide Castle not far from here. But she doesn't consider it a walk unless she walks out to the village and sees other people. She mightn't chat to them, but because she's now seen other people around, she feels she's outside.
Yeah.
Where if we went for a walk around that castle, which is a 5 or 6K walk, if you go around it once and we see no one, she doesn't see that as a walk. So it's people going out to the village, seeing some people around there. Maybe then, she's been out, and even mentally, she said she feels better because she has seen people.
Yeah,
and it is true. Like people working from home, don't make the home the office. Get out there, and you're right. Get out there and do the stuff. Just go back to marketing. Like one of the challenges an awful lot of entrepreneurs and business owners have when they start their own company is, like, if they have a good idea or they have a good product, in today's world, like there's so many outlets with branding now, so where you can try and push, where do they put their energy? Like if you're starting a small company and your budget is limited, where do you put resources for someone to get out there?
Well, I think everything flows from the proper positioning and the proper strategy. Everything else is tactics after that. And the proper positioning and the proper strategy starts from two things. I think you need to be experienced enough to have the perspective to know if your idea is actually really a good idea. A lot of people think they have great ideas, but they've either been done or they haven't enough perspective to see that it's not that good of an idea. But not only that, a great idea comes from really deep insight into who you're trying to sell to, into your target consumer. You have to have something that's meaningful and inherently valuable to a target audience. If not, everything else is harder after that. So, my advice is always get the idea right, have the right perspective to make sure what you have is not only innovative and differentiated and creative and exciting, but to make sure it hasn't been done before, because somebody think it's really hard to have these kind of great ideas right now, but then also really understand your customer. And I'm not just talking about demographically, I'm talking about psychographically. You have to get inside their head and know what they want. And I think that comes from experience. So a lot of young entrepreneurs miss that part. And that's the core to marketing. The core to marketing is proper positioning. And then after proper positioning, understanding your customer. Everything else kind of flows from that. Creative flows from that. Strategy flows from that. But that's where I spend a lot of time. And that's, if you get a chance to take a look at our brands on unboundspirits.com, what you will see is not superficial guesses. Those brands represent very deep understanding of the consumer and what they're looking for, and then taking an idea and differentiating it from other things. So some of it's communications, but some of it's inherent to the product. I mean, let's face it, the classic example of a perfectly positioned product is the iPhone. Think about that. No one knew what it was going to become. And just think of at the beginning how little advertising they had to do, because it was bingo right on the
right from day one.
Perfectly positioned from day one. So was the iPod, actually. So, Apple has done that really, really well for a long time. Now they may be, straying a little bit now, but boy, if you get the positioning right and understand your customer, that takes care of so much. You're not, instead of knocking your head against the wall and spending a fortune in advertising, it creates the right kind of buzz that creates real consumer pull. And that's what you have to get right as a marketer.
Right. And another thing you said to me at the beginning when we were talking off air, the over 50 market, like you say, you're very experienced. You're well tuned in to the over 50 market. Is that a market that people are ignoring, the over 50 market? Is that market there that is untapped and more entrepreneurs should give it serious consideration?
Yeah, I think so, Mark. Let me give you just one basic stat. Half the adults on planet Earth are over age 50. That's stat number one. So that's not a niche. That is a monstrous market. The second point is, and I'm not sure if it's true in Europe, but I know it's true here, 2/3 of the wealth are with people above age 50. So if you're looking for a target market that is underserved, because most companies don't focus on 50 plus and has the money to buy nearly anything, it's, to me, 50 plus. Also, you look at what's happening in social media, it's so youth oriented that the over 50 market does feel underserved in many categories and in many ways. And it doesn't take much research to figure out that they're discontent with many product offerings and they have to compromise in order to consume. And so I feel that going forward, there needs to be a lot more in-depth understanding of the needs of the 50 plus market in order to really tap into that market. But I think it's a huge opportunity. I think it's off the charts in terms of how much potential is there. And what I like best about it is there's not many people focused up there, which is also a good thing.
It is a good thing. And you are right, when you look at TikTok, you look at Facebook, you look at a lot of things, a lot of the stuff that's on that are young people making an impact. And from very young to teenagers and maybe early 20s, they're making their impact, and they're selling some stuff, but you don't see that many, older people.
It's starting. And I think in another 10 years, you'll see more of it. But let's face it, let's face it, here, I'll use myself as an example. I'm 66. A generation ago, they would have moved me out to pasture 5 years ago because I was too old to start or run a company. Now you look at the numbers of startups, and the people age 50, 60, and 70 doing startups it's a big number now. Yeah. And, and in no way is in my head, am I ready to retire? I plan on working until I'm 80 or 85. Why would I retire? I'm having fun, and I can take advantage of many years of experience now to be productive. I've made all the mistakes. Now I can do it right.
And you find too, though, I think I'm over 50 as well. Even if you make the mistakes, you get away with it more because you're not seen as a youngster making a mistake.
Totally. I think that's part of it as well. But, I think we're also in the process of rejiggering the approach to retirement. Now, unfortunately, during COVID, a lot of companies felt people over 50 were too risky. The older you got, the potential risk you are to get sick. And there's a certain actuarial logic to that. I understand that. On the other hand, all the experience and insight of a whole generation is in people above age 50. Why would you want to exclude that from the workforce, from your company culture? I think there's now going to be some pushback, and companies are going to see that they downsize too much, they're too youth focused, and that there's a lot of value to be had by engaging people above 50 and above 60.
Well,
Especially if they're active and fit. Why would they retire if they're sharp as a tack? I don't get it.
no, and also, like, it's funny. I was talking to a friend of mine whose company closed down after the pandemic because he was selling stuff during the pandemic, and he's 61, and he wants to get back working for different companies, for a company. And the only way you could get back was basically doing the job that was advertised, or he's doing a commission only. Because he said he found the view that people were taking was, why take him on if he's going to retire at 65 and they only have him for 4 years? But he's like me, like yourself. He said, I don't want to retire at 65. But no one has asked him that. They just assume. And it's interesting also, I was reading research a while ago. I think it was Winston Churchill or Macmillan when they brought in the pension scheme in the UK in the 50s. There was 12 people working for every one that was going to draw a pension. We're now down to something like 2 people working for every one person going to draw a pension.
I know.
So we all have to move on, and it's happening. But just let's get back to just to wrap things up. You mentioned your book, and it's going extremely well. Do you have any top tips for people who are stuck at the moment? Maybe the company isn't doing as well, and that they're trying to figure out, what do I do? Where do I go next? Is there a next step, or like, is there any advice or any golden nugget you would say to someone? Look, if your business is you don't think it's doing well, you need to ask yourself 1 or 2 questions to see whether you keep moving forward or you wrap it up.
Well, first I would say to maybe use all the topics we've just talked about, bring in a much more experienced person to give you a perspective that you may not have as to whether it's a good idea to keep going forward, or you should take a left turn and start something new. Again, if you're asking yourself that question, I think good outside advice is probably worthwhile.
It is, yeah. The gray hairs.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then the other thing is, ask yourself if you have the energy to persist, because there's that old adage that sometimes you're just a step away from the breakthrough when you give up. I think a lot of ideas die on the vine before they're given a complete chance, because you've run out of energy, or you've run out of willpower or motivation. And again, for me, if you're fit and if you're energetic, you have more of that, and you can go longer.
And the other thing I say, I don't know about you, I say to people is, yes, when you're nearly at the goal, at the vein of the goal, and you give up, is listen to your gut. Listen, like if you listen to everybody else who's saying this isn't working, that isn't working, sometimes you have to just listen to yourself, and then decide what you're going to do.
No, I think so. I mean, it's so trite to say it, but I do sort of rely on my gut. But at this point, my gut has 43 years of experience, so it's not just my gut; it's based on a ton of experience and perspective. And on the other hand, I have stayed with a few businesses probably longer than I should have, because they're good ideas, or I really wanted to see them. There's the idea of, I forget what the term is, but sometimes you can stay with an idea too long because you're emotionally invested in it. It's hard to break up.
Yeah.
So you have to, that's why I guess, having some advisors, having a kind of a personal board of experienced people to help you think that through is good. You shouldn't, it's really hard to be self-critical if you're passionate about things. Yeah, so sometimes you need an outside perspective. And I would encourage that for entrepreneurs, especially, if you're isolated at home. If you're not in an office suite with a bunch of people and you don't have a big team, outside perspective can be very valuable.
It can, yeah. And like when I was meant as a coach, getting someone else's view, yeah. And sit in a room and whiteboarding stuff for people. Just to, sometimes you might have it inside, but you just need to see the idea or see the solution.
Yeah.
There. And sometimes you have to also, you may see the solution, but are you willing to take it if it's not the solution you thought you were going to take? Which is hard. So, Martin, it's been fantastic talking to you. It's great seeing someone who has still so much energy and who's also launching an Irish whiskey, which is fantastic on the Paddy's Day. So I hope that goes extremely well, because that is going to be really, really exciting. That's going to be really exciting.
I appreciate that. We're working hard, and I've got a great team. And by the way, none of us are without gray hairs. We're a senior team. And I think we're acting, we're acting young, or we're still sharp and energetic, and we're having a blast. So it can be done.
It can be. It's like the senior A team. The senior A team. That's what it is. So you mightn't have the van, but you have all the gray hairs.
Yep, exactly right. There you go.
That's brilliant. Martin, thanks very much for your time. I really appreciate it. And it was great talking to you. And
thanks,
hope
Mark.
we'll talk again soon.
I would love to anytime.